think I would first of all start by thanking City Life Show and the people of Lowell who have always been on the forefront. I think the world is catching up with what you have been doing, sending messages out around the world. And I was very impressed to see, there's a clip that John will show later, to see the population in Italy, all of them on the street, singing down with Paul Biya, down with Paul Biya. That is really amazing. So I mean, that is really the grassroots mobilization. That's in Italy. Imagine the whole streets in Rome, so I don't really know the city, but it is very encouraging that the people are rising up against human atrocity. I don't really know the city. I will say Paul Biya, decatory. So that the images that really shows the extent to which that it says Paul Biya, dictator, that dictatori. So for the Italians to go on the street, this is really what we have been trying to do and encouraging Cameroonians, South Cameroonians in this country to reach out to fellow Americans, because they are the ones who will actually bring it to the forefront right now.
And those are Italians, those are not Cameroonian immigrants in that
No, they are Italians. They have been seeing the images, the atrocities, the genocide, and people, families. Just this past weekend, there was a little baby. I didn't want to bring the pictures here because it was the head was blown by the army. And they come to a family, they killed a family of 6, and a child hid under the bed, and that's the only survivor of that. On Monday, while they were meeting at the Security Council, the government sent the Prime Minister to go around the English in Bamenda, meeting with the people. That was just to showcase that they were mounting. Right in Bamenda, the king actually welcomed the Prime Minister in his palace, and on Wednesday, they sent the army to burn the village.
Oh.
A week before that, they had killed the king's, I would say, quarterhead. That the administrative person at the quarterhead, they killed him. So that really shows the atrocity in Cameroon is really reaching a level where beyond.
Are they getting more aggressive as people are responding to them now?
No, they are getting aggressive and confused because the whole world now they have been lying.
Yeah.
Even with the US, Russia, Germany, the European Union, Poland, and all these countries lying up at the Security Council condemning Cameroon. The Camerounian ambassador came on the air, was accusing the US and all these other countries for lying.
Il y a question de violence. J'ai entendu dans tous les exposés tout à l'heure les orateurs parler de violence. Et certains même sont allés jusqu'à incriminer le gouvernement en disant que le gouvernement était de nature flexible et attaquait les populations.
Linda, you know, an army in retreat is a desperate army. On Monday, they had this fake reunification celebration. The president, the guy is lost. The wife had to carry his hands up.
J'imagine là, si je vois la difficulté que nous avons désormais à circuler ici. Ah, le président de la République qui se découvre lui-même devant les écrans géants que
Really?
I don't know who's ruling that country now. The images are out there. He looked like he was just so dazed and confused.
So the end might be near. Do you think that regime is going to fall?
No, the end is near. When the European Union, when the US, when Russia starts condemning him, England, the only people who spoke for Cameroon are France,
Of course.
Cote d'Ivoire, Equatorial Guinea, and Belgium, and one country in South America. These are the only 5 countries. The other ones they spoke. There was a UN representative who went to Cameroon and conducted a research, and with all the pictures.
That's all good stuff.
That is what they were presenting, what they view, what they saw on the ground. But the Cameroun Ambassador made a fool of himself, accusing them that they are supporting the terrorists.
And on behalf of the United States, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's ARIA Formula meeting on the humanitarian crisis in Cameroon. We are joined by a distinguished panel of speakers, and I will introduce them individually in a moment, who will inform us about the scope of the crisis and make recommendations on how to address it.
That's about 3 minutes.
I would like to thank our co-hosts, the Dominican Republic, Germany, and the United Kingdom for their support in organizing today's gathering, and we would like to warmly welcome participating member states and members of civil society who are joining us in this room and via webcast all over the world. Today's meeting is an opportunity to better understand Cameroon's humanitarian crisis, the challenges and the dangers of helping populations in need, and the threats to respect for international humanitarian law. Our desired outcomes for this meeting are an increased awareness and visibility of the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Cameroon, plus the immediate opening of humanitarian space and the provision of unhindered access for humanitarian personnel by parties to the conflict. Since 2018, the United States government has contributed more than $87 million in Cameroon to provide humanitarian assistance to host communities, IDPs, and refugees. This aid is critical for saving lives, but it can only be effective when we have access to vulnerable populations. To better understand the scale of the crisis, I am delighted to be joined by leaders in the field with firsthand knowledge of the situation on the ground. Undersecretary General Mark Lowcock needs no introduction regarding his role in overseeing UN humanitarian assistance. We are grateful that you are here. We also welcome 2 expert practitioners who made the trip to New York to speak to us regarding their personal experiences providing humanitarian assistance in Cameroon. Esther Omam Njomo is the Executive Director of Reach Out Cameroon. Welcome, Esther, to the UN, and thank you for taking the trip from the southwest region of Cameroon. Father Paul Fru Njokikang serves as the Director of Caritas for the Archdiocese of Bamenda in the northwest region of Cameroon. Thank you for joining us in New York. Finally, noted humanitarian Jan Egeland, the current Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council and former UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, joins us by video conference from Oslo. John, we look forward to hearing more about what you saw and heard during your recent trip to Cameroon.
That's him coming.
But first things...
Yes, so that's really the good news that we want the international community and also mostly the Security Council on the humanitarian affairs is listening to witnesses and people. It just goes to show that what we have been doing here has an effect. I quite recall many times John said he has received calls from all over the world, Europe, Argentina, and calling about the show. And when you see non-Cameroonians, the Italians on the streets, shouting dictator Paul Biya, that really goes a long way to show that when you see people killings and dying everywhere, the humanity in people makes all of them come out, and it's really what we are calling. I'm particularly calling on all Cameroonians and Ambazonians out in the diaspora to make sure that they take the words to the street in any borough, in any county, wherever they are. They should sensitize and educate the people so that they rise up and advocate for us. So that
You should certainly stand tall. You've done your part. Because you've been in here and you've been the activist that has brought it to our attention. Everybody else, it's so nice to see that. That's encouraging. There's finally something in the UN that, keeps it, because I know you've been on several times and we keep saying, where's the UN? Where's the rest of the world? How can this happen? So we're on a road, it looks like it. That's step one, that at least they're looking at it. They can see I don't see how anyone can turn their head when they see that, what's going on in Cameroon. So
that's very true, and I'm very, very gracious and thankful for this platform, and even LTC, the City Council, those resolutions that were taken at the City Council, and the LTC and City Life Show, bringing it to the world, to the whole world, showed that Lowell has been the forefront of standing with its sister city, Bamenda. And on behalf of the people of Bamenda, I really say thank you and thank you.
So we're talking about a king. So how does the king fit into this? I thought that Cameroon was a strictly sort of parliamentary democracy kind of thing. Did this king exist before the union of the Anglophone and the Francophone Cameroon?
I think that's a very important question, Cliff. If the best way for Americans to understand this is come back to this country, you have the Navajo tribes. They have their chiefs. The kings in Africa are the true rulers of the African continent before the European came with introduced their own system of government. Here you have the Navajo chiefs. You go to the American Indians, they still maintain their tradition. So the paramount king of Mancon, His Royal Highness King Wafo III, who visited Lowell on 2 occasions, is the paramount king of in that biggest ruler in Bamenda in the Northwest region. So when we talk about when the British came in English Cameroon, they maintained the House of Chiefs. The House of Chiefs in English Cameroon was like the Congress. Because it is true that these are the people who have their eyes on the ground, who are custodians of the tradition, the African culture. So they facilitated and helped the British to administer governance to the people, because they understand very well and they are in tune with the culture. But unlike the French came, they destroyed the culture and appointed their own chiefs.
Oh, okay.
So those chiefs were answerable to the French.
Okay.
Not really to the people, because if you look in England, the King of England is by birth. You are born into the royal family, and if you look at those royal families in Europe, you had the Austrians, you still have their kings. They are born, not appointed. So when the French, to destroy that culture, that allegiance that have been paid to the people, to the land, now they pay allegiance to the French. So that is how
It would be like coming in and trying to destroy the the chiefs of the Navajo.
Exactly, Linda, you pointed very well. That was the French system. The French system came there and want to make you be French, not recognize your own identity. And that's really the difference between the two cultures that has brought a lot of problems in Africa, that the French, wherever they go, there is always problem because they want to make you be French person. They don't want to respect you and make you be who you are. And knowing full well, as I was growing up, my father always told me that, Fru, your culture is your identity. You cannot run away from your culture. And your culture is more or less like your shadow. Wherever you go, your shadow is with you. Even in darkness, when you turn on the lights, your shadow follows you.
Yeah, I'm not shocked about this with regard to the French, because the French have this sort of arrogance about being French, the French Revolution and all that. And
well, the
it's a different outlook.
The French Revolution came as a result of the destruction of their own monarchy. You had Louis XVI, Louis XIV, Louis XVI, and Napoleon overtook in France. And you see what is going on in Cameroon is a replica of what went on in France, the reign of terror. You talk of people like Robespierre and all those people, there were killings, and the king finally was beheaded, was guillotined. So what is really going on in Cameroon is actually they are reading from the French book, and no one would doubt it that the French is really the one who's guiding these people on the floor, on the ground, because you see villages are burned, people are beheaded, killed alive, and that is really to inflict a terror. Because as I just mentioned, the quarter hit at Tamben, that's where my village of birth. The king received the governor, and then 2 days after they came and burned the village. Wherever there is stability and peace in Cameroon, mostly in the English part of Cameroon, the army will go there and instill fear. And most of these people are in the bushes. There's a passionate clip there that John will show about one of the non-profit philanthropic organizations that's helping to give aid to the displaced people. That the head of that organization was testified at the UN.
While John's bringing that up, from the French Revolution, it reminds me of the French general who went to subdue the Vendée province and said, there will be no one to testify that I did anything wrong, because I will kill them all.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the United States, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's ARIA Formula meeting on the humanitarian crisis in Cameroon. We are joined by a distinguished panel of speakers, and I will introduce them individually in a moment, who will inform us about the scope of the crisis and make recommendations on how to address it. I would like to thank our co-hosts, the Dominican Republic, Germany, and the United Kingdom for their support in organizing today's gathering, and we would like to warmly welcome participating member states and members of civil society who are joining us in this room and via webcast all over the world. Today's meeting is an opportunity to better understand Cameroon's humanitarian crisis, the challenges and the dangers of helping populations in need, and the threats to respect for international humanitarian law. Our desired outcomes for this meeting are an increased awareness and visibility of the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Cameroon, plus the immediate opening of humanitarian space and the provision of unhindered access for humanitarian personnel by parties to the conflict. Since 2018, the United States government has contributed more than $87 million in Cameroon to provide humanitarian assistance to host communities, IDPs, and refugees. This aid is critical for saving lives, but it can only be effective when we have access to vulnerable populations. To better understand the scale of the crisis, I am delighted to be joined by leaders in the field with firsthand knowledge of the situation on the ground. Undersecretary General Mark Lowcock needs no introduction regarding his role in overseeing UN humanitarian assistance. We are grateful that you are here. We also welcome 2 expert practitioners who made the trip to New York to speak to us regarding their personal experiences providing humanitarian assistance in Cameroon. Esther Omam Njomo is the Executive Director of Reach Out Cameroon. Welcome, Esther, to the UN, and thank you for taking the trip from the southwest region of Cameroon. Father Paul Fru Njokikang serves as the Director of Caritas for the Archdiocese of Bamenda in the northwest region of Cameroon. Thank you for joining us in New York. Finally, noted humanitarian Jan Egeland, the current Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council and former UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, joins us by video conference from Oslo. John, we look forward to hearing more about what you saw and heard during your recent trip to Cameroon. But first things first, Undersecretary Lowcock, I invite you to set the stage for our conversation. The floor is yours.
Cameroon, which is one of the largest economies in Africa, is currently facing worsening violence and conflict. Today, 4.3 million people need humanitarian assistance across the country. That is 30% more than last year, and it means that 1 Cameroonian in 6 needs humanitarian assistance or protection. And most of those people needing help, more than half of them are children. The humanitarian situation in the northwest and southwest regions has rapidly deteriorated, and that is what I want to talk most about in my presentation to you today. The crisis in the northwest and southwest regions started with peaceful protests in the English-speaking regions, but has now turned violent. It was one of the fastest growing displacement crises in Africa last year. For the past 3 years, the population has been subjected to ongoing violence and attacks by armed actors. The level of the crisis today is more alarming than ever. Both the humanitarian and the security situation continue to deteriorate and run the risk of spiralling out of control, including in neighbouring departments, namely the littoral and west. In 2018, last year, 160,000 people were estimated to need humanitarian assistance in the northwest and southwest regions. Today, there are not 160,000, but more than 1.3 million people, at least 8 times as many in need, and that amounts to 1/3 of the local population. 500,000 people are internally displaced. Some of those internally displaced people stay with host communities in the main towns in the western part of the country, or in Yaoundé, or in the country's largest city, Douala. Most of them, though, are still hiding in the forests in fear of violence. Thousands of homes and entire villages have been destroyed across the 2 regions, and that poses significant challenges to the goal of return for people who fled. The fear of attacks further prevents people from being able to return, and also prevents access to previous livelihoods, especially farming and other livelihood opportunities in their home areas. That means those people are essentially increasingly, and in some cases totally, reliant on humanitarian assistance. Ordinary people are the direct targets of violence. Children are caught in crossfire. They're subject to arbitrary arrest and detention. The northwest and southwest regions used previously to be the places where education was best across the country, but a ban on education imported by armed actors has undermined that. In the past 3 years, at least 70 schools have been destroyed, pupils have been kidnapped, teachers have been kidnapped. Today, more than 80% of schools are closed. and more than 600,000 children are deprived of an education in both regions. Attacks on medical staff and infrastructure have also increased. There have been at least 70 such incidents noted since last year. They include the abductions of medical staff. They also include the burning of at least 3 hospitals. In both regions, some 40% of health facilities are simply not operational. Sexual violence and abuse are also increasingly documented. There are reports of girls as young as 13 living in the forest, pregnant and scared to move. It's in no one's interest, I think, to see the humanitarian situation spiral out of control. So I ask today for the help of the international community in 3 areas. First and foremost, to increase awareness of the humanitarian problem in Cameroon, and this afternoon's meeting is an important way of doing that, but we need to build on it. We have to persuade everybody to come together to address the underlying causes of the current crisis, including and especially the need for peaceful resolution of conflict and the need for more progress with sustainable development. Secondly, I ask for your support and that of others to improve the financing we have for the humanitarian operation so that we can reach a larger proportion of those people in need. And thirdly, I ask for your help and assistance in persuading and causing all parties to respect international law and to provide safe, timely and unimpeded humanitarian access. Anybody with influence over the parties should please exercise that influence. And we'll also need to urgently strengthen awareness and respect for humanitarian principles, including the protection of education and medical facilities. I've described to you the attacks on those facilities, which, as you know, those attacks are violations, and we need better compliance with the key elements of international law. This situation is quite urgent, and I therefore rely on your support to enable us to tackle it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary General Lowcock, for those sobering facts and calls for action and what we can do to help.
Okay, like the next clip that's coming up now, John, that's the head of the humanitarian project in Cameroon. She is actually one of those who were invited, and she's talking about her own experience and how she really missed death so many times.
Esther, your organization has been responding to the needs identified at the community levels. We welcome your statement about what you are seeing on the ground. Esther.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Security Council for inviting me today to this important meeting on Cameroon. I am Jomo Esther Omam, the Executive Director of Reach Out, a locally based organization, civil society organization, whose headquarters is in the southwest region of Cameroon. Equally, I am the General Coordinator for the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force. It pleases me to sit before you this day, not only as the Executive Director of Reach Out, nor the General Coordinator of the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force, but as a woman, a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a sister who would like to give a human face to the ongoing crisis in the 2 regions today. I am here to talk on behalf of those women, mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters who have lost it all to this crisis. Those who are trapped in the bushes, in the forest, because they lost everything which they could hold on to. I am here today thinking about those women who are living in uncompleted buildings in other regions, other than where they were living. I am here today talking on behalf of those women who are today called refugees or internally displaced, who live in host communities, those who live in motor parks, those who live in petrol stations, those whose children are not going to school, those girls and women who are sexually abused, and the boys who have adopted negative coping attitudes. I am equally here today to talk on behalf of the Southwest and Northwest Women's Task Force, whose aim is to significantly contribute in ending this crisis. I am here for those women who for the past 1 year have been carrying this symbol of orange, which stands for non-violence, meaning that women, mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters, we are for non-violence. The UN could support greater efforts to encourage talks and dialogue between the conflicting parties, who are brothers, for an eventual end to the crisis, for them to come up with a roadmap to achieving sustainable peace that builds more on our existing strength and influence. I earlier said that I had been a victim 3 times. 2 times, I was attacked in my home at gunpoint. The first time, I was thrown on the floor and a knock hit my head, which caused me getting low cuts since then because I developed health issues. Still, I kept my morale high because I had many who were looking on to me for provision of care and support. The second time, in my own very house, all of my family was held hostage for 3 hours, for I don't know why. And my grandson, the first grandson, was being taken away from me when I was giving him medication because he was very sick after his first anniversary. And he was being tossed up and down like a ball and threatened to be taken away from me when the mother was not even in the region. And I asked the people in front of me, my son, what did I do wrong that I should get this from you? I died that day. I died that day as a mother, as a grandmother. But I resurrected with the determination to forge ahead in my activism to see that I carry on the crusade for peace, because I could put myself in the shoes of all those women and girls who have gone through the pains and suffering which I just witnessed in a very short period of time. The third time, my 2 children on the 20th of April were kidnapped. And again, I kept cool the first day, the second day. I put on the face of a CEO and a general coordinator. In the night of the second day, I could not bear it anymore. The mother in me resurrected, and I passed out. Thanks to an adopted doctor of mine, I was brought back to life. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of all those women who have gone through these ordeals, through the pains and sufferings. And I'm here today to talk about that little girl who is called Mariana, whose mother and siblings were shot And the father had to flee, had to run into the bushes, into the forest. And she was left alone in the care of her paternal aunt. And because the paternal aunt had a son who is dropped out from school because schools are not going on, and this child was not also going to school, a 12-year-old girl, she was sexually abused by this boy and got pregnant. And when the aunts discovered this, she was thrown away from that house, sent to the unknown. And our members got this information and brought the report to us. And we as mothers, as women, were heartbroken and we started looking for this girl. What about Mama Joanna, who told us in one of our distribution sites where we are distributing food in collaboration, in partnership with WFP, who told us that she had to trek for 2 to 3 hours in order to get to us for food, that she passed so many corpses. As she was coming in the forest path, and other women saw and got frightened and went back. What about Mr. John, who left one of the villages and had to trek 20 kilometers in order to get to one of the distribution sites? What about all these people who are going through pain and suffering? We think that it is time for us to start silencing the guns. We think that it is time for us to start talking. Let us begin to talk. Let us start talking genuinely. Let us start having inclusive dialogue. Let us sit face to face, facing each other, discussing the issues, and identifying common grounds, and looking for the way forward. That way forward, that will lead us to sustainable, peaceful solutions.
So this Reverend Father from Bamenda, that's a sister city with Lowell.
Father, I now invite you to share your experiences with the council.
Thank you, Madam President, and all protocol duly respected, for giving me this unique opportunity to address this august assembly. I am most honored and humbled, but delighted to share with you on the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon. I am a priest and a pastor, and at the same time, the director of Caritas Bamenda. I would have preferred to be back home providing the badly needed humanitarian assistance to my affected, hungry, starving, stressed, and traumatized people. I am not a politician, but I'm here because of the lives of about 4 million people who are affected by this crisis. Within the context of the ongoing socio-political crisis, ever since it degenerated into an armed conflict in 2017 till date, things are only getting worse. The escalation began in the Anglophone regions in September 2017, when Cameroon security forces used live ammunition on peaceful protesters in protest marches. There have recently been disappearances, and even up to a few days ago, when I flew from Cameroon, corpses have been found in various places in Bamenda. Within the last 10 months, several thousands of civilians have been killed. The disappearance and death of young males is no longer news, and some of those who have been killed are persons with disability or special needs or the aged who cannot run away to safety. For want of time, and sparing this noble house the embarrassment of the saddening situation we live in the Anglophone regions, I have left out the details of the recorded murders perpetrated either by the armed separatist groups, otherwise known as the Amba Boys, or the Cameroonian military, which acts as an instrument of terror. In Bui Division alone, more than 1,500 houses have been razed down by flames, and the figures are on the increase. In Menchum Division, over 1,350 homes have been burnt down. In Momo Division, 2,000 plus homes and businesses razed to ashes. In Boyo, over 400 houses and at least 6 hospitals have been affected partly or completely by fires. The recent case being that of the district hospital of Kumba. These figures are not exhaustive, Madam President, and I am afraid they are on the rise. The disquieting saga of St. Augustine's College, in which 176 members of the Catholic institution were adopted on the 16th of February 2018. Of this number, 170 students were generally below the age of 18. 3 of our priests who tried to follow the trail of the abductees were also caught and detained by the same group, and all were only released a day later. These incidents forced the institutions to close down, including a minor seminary and other schools in the locality. Also, the St. Elizabeth General Hospital and Cardiac Center, the only cardiac center in West and Central of Africa, as well as the Banso Baptist Hospital, are not left out in this malaise. Health workers have been victims of this crisis. 3 nurses have already been shot dead on their way to or from work, dressed in uniforms. Several have been attacked and wounded, even in the hospitals, where they render service to the nation. The military have got into health facilities with firearms, supposedly searching for anyone suspected to be a pro-independence fighter undergoing treatment. I appeal for the UN to equally scale up humanitarian assistance and force the Cameroonian government to demilitarize the Anglophone regions. I received the very first set of displaced persons. There were 25 in number. They had been attacked, their homes burned, and a lady among them, her husband was shot point blank in front of her, and a military person used his own motorbike and poured gasoline on him and lit fire and had this man burned right in front of the wife. The wife was badly beaten with the machete, her hands wounded with the cutlass. She was beaten on the buttocks with a little baby of 2 years and another one that we're still holding, which was 5 years old. These came to my office. When they shared their experience, I wept. Madam President, the people of the English-speaking regions in Cameroon are primarily agrarian, with houses burned and seeds lost. And adding to that, the farming season of 2018 was irregular due to the crisis. And so has been this season which just began. And only an estimate of 20% of the population have planted in that area, and which is an area which largely depends on agriculture. Food insecurity, therefore, malnutrition, and associated health challenges are imminent in the near future. Madam President, our people of these two English regions are suffering a lot. I bear witness to this. I meet them on a daily basis. We are in pain. We are traumatized. We are sandwiched between the Amber boys and the government security forces. Fear is the order of the day. One cannot talk freely. I speak out the truth because it's a noble thing to do. It is doing a service to my country, even if it means I will be hated and killed. It is better to die with dignity for having told the truth than to live with shame for covering up. There is an urgency to make a roadmap and engage both parties. Look at the root causes and drop the cosmetic solutions. Thank you for your kind attention, and God bless you all.
Jan, I hope you have been able to hear the conversation so far. And following your trip to Cameroon, what would you like the UN Security Council to know about what you saw? Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank the Security Council for this opportunity to speak about the massive humanitarian suffering I witnessed when I visited Cameroon 3 weeks ago. But let me start by commending and endorsing the strong statements from our two Cameroonian colleagues and from Mark Lowcock. So I traveled to the southwest province of Cameroon and to the far north. In the former, I met with the communities fleeing armed conflict. In the latter, I spoke with refugees and internally displaced families fleeing Boko Haram violence. Madam President, when brutal fighting displaces hundreds of thousands of civilians, it usually sets international alarm bells ringing. But the shocking unmet needs of tens of thousands of people fleeing violence in southwest and northwest Cameroon has so far resulted in no systematic mediation effort, no large relief program, little international media interest, and too little pressure on the parties to stop attacking civilians. So the collective silence surrounding the atrocities is as shocking as the untold stories are heartbreaking, and we heard several here today. And that is why this session is so important, and I congratulate the conveners for having put it up. A group of displaced and disillusioned women I met told me that they felt abandoned by the international community. As much as they fear the conflicting parties. And they asked me, where is the international solidarity? Where are the African organizations? Where are the donor nations? Where is Europe? This conflict has, after all, some of its roots in generations of interference from European colonial powers. I was also, like my colleagues who spoke, shocked by the scale and brutality of the blunt violence against civilians. Even hospitals have been attacked and health workers fear for their lives. The absence of a humanitarian response commensurate to the hundreds of thousands of people in great need and with unmet needs is striking. We are too few humanitarian actors on the ground, and we are gravely underfunded. My colleagues in the Norwegian Refugee Council and the other relief organizations on the ground tell me they can reach many more people in need in the conflict-ravaged areas in the southwest and northwest, despite the insecurity. And the parties to the conflict now also tell us They are ready to support access to all areas of great need. This includes the Southwest Governor, whom I spoke to in Buea, and it includes the armed opposition groups with whom we are in contact. And now our immediate priority must be access and assistance to the people hiding in the bushes, who are, as of today, receiving no assistance nor protection. They fear they cannot return to their villages, nor do they feel that it is safe for them to go to the urban centers. These families are terrorized beyond belief. The crisis in the English-speaking part of Cameroon is, without any doubt, one of the world's most neglected at the moment. The lack of information and international political tension has not prevented the situation to deteriorate from peaceful demonstrations to the current atrocities committed by both sides. So, as my colleagues just said, we not act now, more lives and more hope will be lost, and the future of a generation of Cameroonians do hang in the balance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan, for your firsthand insights of the challenges on the ground and what the UN system and international community can do. I will now give the floor to the representative of Cameroon. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Ambassador Charit, Madame la Présidente. For many years, it had been hosting a large number of refugees and displaced persons on its soil due to the occasional, recurrent, or persistent conflicts in neighboring countries. Recently, the flow of displaced persons has increased as a result of the action of war. The Front of the Secession, animated by a group of separatists aiming to create in the Northwest and Southwest region a so-called Federal Republic of Ambazonia, and the third from the Front of Salvation, aiming at challenging, destabilizing, and overthrowing the institution of the country, as well as the people who embody them. Également, je voudrais dire que tout à l'heure, lorsque les présentateurs ont fait leur sujet, à la porte, le sujet de cette réunion est Area Formula Meeting de Humanitarian Situation in Cameroon. On a parlé de crise et on a centré tout cela sur le sud-ouest et le nord-ouest. J'ai entendu de manière furtive allusion à d'autres régions, ce qui fait donc que le sujet n'était pas abordé comme tel, et on comprend donc qu'on est venu chercher noise et chercher les poux sur la tête et les chics dans les pieds du Cameroun, ce qui n'est pas tout à fait approprié. Je voudrais conclure en disant aussi que nous avons une administration debout. Et je suis tout à fait encouragé par ceux qui ont dit que mieux vaut approcher le Cameroun, demander à son gouvernement, demander à tout ce qui est fait, qu'est-ce qu'il y a lieu de faire. Je vous ai indiqué tout à l'heure, dans le plan de mise en œuvre de notre plan humanitaire, je vous ai indiqué ce par quoi nous voulons être aidés. Nous ne voulons pas des gens qui travaillent pour le Cameroun, mais nous voulons les gens qui travaillent avec le Cameroun.